I learned that a house can feel occupied even when you're the only one inside it, and that loneliness doesn't always arrive quietly. Sometimes it announces itself before you realize you're listening. The sound didn't belong there. That was the first thing I knew for sure. It didn't fit the hour, or the weather, or the fact that my street was supposed to be empty. It slipped into the house the way cold air does through a cracked window, soft at first, almost easy to ignore, until it settled deep enough that I couldn't pretend it wasn't real anymore. It was only my second night alone. That was what made it feel unfair. I hadn't even had time to get used to the quiet yet. My girlfriend had left town for the holidays, heading to her parents' place a few states away. I stayed behind because of work, telling myself I didn't mind. I even convinced myself I was looking forward to it. A week alone, no obligations, no schedules to match, just me, the house, and a stretch of days that belonged entirely to no one else. I live in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place that looks calm enough to be staged. Long driveways, trees that grow too close to the road, houses spread far apart enough that you don't hear your neighbors unless they want you to. Around Christmas, most people leave. They visit family. They escape the snow. By the time December really settles in, the neighborhood feels abandoned. The first night passed without incident. I slept poorly, but that wasn't unusual. The house sounded different without another person in it. Pipes knocked louder. The floors creaked longer than they should have. Still, I woke up thinking I'd adjusted. The second night was colder. Snow had been falling on and off all day, light but persistent, the kind that covers everything evenly and makes the world feel muted. By early evening, the sky was already dark, and the street outside my front window looked like a photograph, still, white, and untouched. I was in the kitchen making dinner, something simple that didn't require much thought. I turned on the TV in the living room and let it run, not because I was watching it, but because silence felt heavier when it wasn't broken up by something familiar. Plates clinked, water boiled, the house felt large. That's when I heard it. At first, it didn't register as anything specific, just a sound threaded through the noise of the television, too rhythmic to be accidental. I thought it was part of whatever was playing, some background music bleeding into the room. I ignored it for longer than I should have. When it didn't stop, I muted the TV. The house fell into a deeper quiet, and suddenly the sound had nowhere to hide. Someone was singing. It was distant enough that I couldn't make out the words at first, but close enough that it was unmistakably human. The voice wasn't strong. It wasn't joyful. It wavered slightly, like the singer wasn't confident or didn't care if they stayed on key. I stood still, listening, trying to place it. It was coming from outside. The words came into focus slowly, as if my brain resisted recognizing them. When it finally clicked, my stomach tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Jingle bells. The song drifted through the cold air, carried across the snow, casual and wrong. It didn't sound like kids. It didn't sound like a group. It sounded like one adult man, singing alone, unhurried, repeating the same familiar tune like it was the only thing he knew. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. Carolers existed, even if I'd never seen any in my neighborhood before. Someone could be drunk. Someone could be lost. The holidays make people do strange things. Still, I found myself moving toward the front door without deciding to. With every step closer, the singing grew louder, clearer. By the time I reached the door, it felt like the sound was right on the other side of it. I hesitated with my hand on the knob, that first flicker of instinct telling me this wasn't normal. But I ignored it. I didn't want to be the kind of person who overreacted to something harmless. When I opened the door, the porch light came on automatically. The man stood there like he'd been placed deliberately, centered on the welcome mat. He looked to be in his mid-30s, maybe older. He didn't wear a hat.
His coat was thin, the kind meant for fall, not for standing still in December snow. His breath fogged faintly in the air. He didn't look up when the door opened. He kept singing, eyes lowered, focused on the mat beneath his feet. His voice didn't falter. It didn't acknowledge me at all. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending politeness, pretending this was normal. Seconds stretched, then minutes. The song looped again. I checked my phone without breaking eye contact and saw that nearly 4 minutes had passed since I'd opened the door. That's when I felt it clearly, the urge to end the interaction, whatever it took. I thanked him, my voice stiff, and gently pushed the door closed. The singing didn't stop. It continued at the same volume, just on the other side of the wood. The sound seeped into the door like it belonged there. I went back to the table and sat down, trying to finish my meal. I told myself he would leave soon, that he was waiting for some cue I'd failed to give. The longer it went on, the more invasive it felt, like someone standing too close behind you, not touching, but making their presence undeniable. I couldn't focus on the food. I couldn't focus on anything except the fact that a stranger was still right outside my home, singing the same song again and again. About half an hour later, it stopped. The silence that followed was sharp. It made my chest jump like I'd missed a step on the stairs. I realized how used to the sound I'd become, how quickly it had woven itself into the space. I approached the door again, slower this time, and looked through the glass. He was still there. He had moved to the end of my driveway, standing in the snow, facing the house. His arms hung loosely at his sides. He wasn't singing anymore. He was just watching. Something about that was worse. It felt deliberate, like waiting. I cracked the door open and told him he needed to leave, that he was on private property. My voice sounded thin even to me. He didn't react, didn't shift his weight, didn't acknowledge the words. I told him I would call the police. I closed the door and watched him through the glass. He stayed exactly where he was. I didn't want to involve the police. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe I still believed there was an explanation that didn't involve danger. Maybe I didn't want to escalate something I didn't understand. Instead, I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and tried to convince myself the situation was over. Before changing, I checked the window. The driveway was empty. Relief hit me so fast that it made my knees weak. I told myself the threat had worked. That was the end of it. I got into bed, turned on a lamp, and opened a book, forcing myself to read words that wouldn't stick. About 20 minutes passed. Then I heard it again. The same voice, the same song, only now it was coming from behind the house. I was out of bed instantly, heart pounding hard enough to feel in my throat. I went to the back window and looked down. He was in my backyard, standing directly below my bedroom window, in the snow, looking straight up at me. He sang without expression, his breath visible in the cold, his eyes locked on mine like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I slid the door open and yelled that I was calling the police. The singing stopped immediately. For 3 seconds, he stood there in complete silence. Then he ran. He disappeared from view as he sprinted toward the back door below, and the sound that followed didn't sound human anymore. A scream tore through the yard, raw and violent, echoing off the trees and the house itself. It rose and fell in a way that made my stomach twist, like something had broken loose inside him. The banging started next. The back door shook under the impact of his body slamming into it, kicks rattling metal. The vibrations traveled up through the walls, through the floor, into my feet. I realized then that he wasn't confused, he wasn't harmless. He wanted inside. I called 911 with shaking hands, backing away from the window. I grabbed the nearest thing that could be used as a weapon and retreated into the bedroom closet, pulling the door shut behind me. The operator told me to stay hidden, to stay quiet. I could still hear him screaming downstairs, hear the door protesting under the force. Every second stretched into something unbearable. I waited for the sound of breaking wood, for footsteps on the stairs. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. I didn't know if he'd left or if he'd gotten inside. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, until I heard sirens in the distance. Even then, I didn't move until the police confirmed it was safe. They found deep footprints in the snow, evidence of where he'd stood, where he'd run. The trail led into the woods behind my property and disappeared. They didn't find him. They told me to lock my doors, that people act strangely sometimes, that it wasn't worth searching the woods at night. After they left, the house felt colder than it ever